Well, Tom, welcome to the show, man. It's great to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, my pleasure. So where do you call home? Where are you at?
Well, I spend a lot of time in the Florida Keys and also Tennessee. So right now I'm in Tennessee, but most of my business takes me to the Florida Keys.
Okay. And so where are you from originally?
I'm from Tennessee.
Okay.
I
Okay.
grew up here and then in a place called Chattanooga. And when I
Uh-huh.
grew up in Chattanooga, it wasn't a very nice place. And I was ready to leave as soon as I got out of high school. But we had a couple of good mayors, and man, they really cleaned up the city while I was gone. And I have three kids, and it just got a better and better place, and eventually what I thought would never happen happened. We come back and spend a lot of time here.
Right. I'm from Dallas originally. Now I live about 20 miles north up in McKinney. And the mayor of Dallas, recently switched from Democrat to Republican. Like
Oh
just
yeah.
African American guy. He was like, you know what, this isn't working. And we're going to clean this city up. We're going to fix things. And he just switched parties. I never would have thought I would have seen that either.
Wow.
So,
Wonder
yeah.
why he would have to switch parties like that. You think that he was being like restricted in what he could do by the Democratic Party, and he just decided, you know what, the city's more important, or
100%. Yeah. The
yeah.
Democrats eat their own. Like if you get out of line, for example, there was in Texas, we just had a lady lose her primary from Houston because she voted with the conservatives on essentially not transgendering children. And
Hmm.
I mean, she got slaughtered, and she was doing a good job. But once she did that, they spent a lot of money, ran someone against her because she stepped out of line. Can't do that.
Wow.
So yeah. Um, so Florida's my second favorite state. If I didn't live in
Second
Texas,
favorite?
oh yeah, 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 I love Florida. Actually, we're leaving for Florida on July 4th.
All right.
So I don't know if this will air before that, but yeah, we're
Part of
heading there
Florida
with.
do you like?
Uh, I d- well, I mean, as long as DeSantis is governor and the things are going the way that they are, like, you could say anywhere in Florida. But last time I was in Florida, my wife and I went for my 40th birthday, so a couple years ago, and I wanted to catch a big snook. So we have snook on the Texas coast, but not like the big ones
Yeah.
that you guys have. And so we went fishing with Mike Holiday, Captain Mike
Yeah.
Holiday. You know Mike?
Oh yeah, I've known Mike for a long time.
We used to work together on Costa stuff, and
Uh-huh.
since that was probably a decade ago at this point, but yeah, so he randomly it was like a last minute thing, and he's like, "I actually have your birthday open," so we went, and my wife caught like a 44-inch snook, and I did not.
Nice. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
a fishy dude, man. Mike will put you on him.
yeah. And now I got a replica made for her, and she was like, What? Why'd you do that?" I'm like, "Cause it's awesome." Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
it is.
we caught a bunch of big fish.
There's some amazing snook fishing. I think right now the snook fishing, certainly where we fish in the Everglades, probably further south than where you were fishing, but in the Everglades, the Flamingo area, and all through the Florida Keys, the snook fishing is the best it's been in a long, long time. And
Hmm.
I know that we wanted to talk about sharks a little bit here too, but um, it's interesting to see that the snook fishing is as good as it has ever been, as there is an explosion in sharks as well. You
Yeah,
know,
that doesn't make sense, but
well, it does kind of a little bit, because if you have an explosion in sharks, they have to eat something. So you're not going to
yeah.
get an explosion in anything if there's not enough to eat.
Hmm.
So I think that while there are a lot of people upset about the explosion in sharks, it also is a good sign for the overall health of the fishery.
Yeah.
Like that, I don't really want them eating all my snook, but they got to eat something too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So someone's got to support them.
So we flew into, I guess, what would that have been? Well, we were fishing close to Palm Springs, right? Is
Palm
that
Beach, maybe.
Palm Beach? What? Palm Springs is in California. I would never go there. Yeah, so we were close to Palm Beach. But the one thing Mike said, though, although the snook fishing was great, man, he was hot under the collar about the trout fishing. He said it has just been completely decimated. Where he used to catch limits, there's no trout there whatsoever, and a lot of it I think had to do with like part of it, the estuary being silted in.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm not as familiar, certainly not as familiar with what's going on up there as Mike is, but we've had a lot of water problems, preventable water problems in the state of Florida, and DeSantis has been really good about that. He has been a good friend of this organization that I like a lot, Captains for Clean Water,
Mm-hmm.
and there's been a lot of things that have been maybe mismanaged. Certainly not ideal, whether it was management or just natural factors. The silting in of that fishery is probably one of them. Certainly the management of the water, um, which is a really big issue in the Florida. It's like, most people don't know about the water problems in Florida because it doesn't make sense to them. It didn't make sense to
Mm-hmm.
me for a long time about how you could have way too much fresh water in certain areas and not enough fresh water in other areas. But the Everglades used to be a wide river of grass all the way across the whole state of Florida, and it was just kind of a laminar flow, and all this fresh water would just go right through the Everglades into Flamingo area, and we would get tons of fresh water. And through mosquito spraying and dikes and canals and roads and bridges and all these other things, all this water has been stopped up. And so the flow of fresh water south has been almost stopped completely. And now, in order to, when it rains a lot, you get Lake Okeechobee will fill up with water, and then they have to send it out the two rivers that go out the sides of Florida. So
Mm-hmm.
there's an unnatural amount of fresh water on occasion going out both sides of Florida, and an unnaturally light amount of water going down south. So it's really just, we kind of changed it, man-made changes,
Yeah.
which caused all kinds of problems.
He tried to explain that Okeechobee effect to me a little bit, saying that was.
Hard to understand really because Florida's a big state, and
Uh-huh.
but that's what happens is you get a lot of water, Okeechobee fills up. They need to get rid of that water somehow. It used to be a natural progression south,
Yeah.
and that changed. That's the big thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know how you guys combat that issue. It seems like that ship might have sailed.
Well, that's what I thought too, until my friends at the Cabins for Clean Water told me that, look, there's already been legislation, there's already been a vote, there's already been money set aside to build these settling reservoirs, the EAA reservoir, and they just haven't been built. No one has used this money to do what it was set aside for, which makes me think that that money has probably disappeared a long time ago, and they're just kicking
Uh-huh.
the down the road a little bit. But these these settling reservoirs would allow them to move water out of the lake, let it settle out, treat it so that there's not all this fertilizer, effluent kind of stuff that's what happens is it goes out the side of Florida. There's tons of fertilizer and other things that even, not just the stuff that the farmers are using, but the stuff we put on our lawns, the stuff that comes off the streets, just lots of bad
Yeah.
stuff goes in there. And then it hits this hot water on both sides of the Florida, and it blows up into, an unnatural algae bloom.
Mm. Mm.
That very damaging to everything.
Mm-hmm. So we need some like catch reservoirs on either side, just to
Well, there,
overflow.
yeah,
Overflow.
yeah, pretty much.
Oh, okay.
And they can treat it and then let it out slower, right? Let it out at a more natural rate instead of this whitewater river in a place that should be a gently flowing stream
Yeah.
out of the Gulf of Mexico.
That's not unheard of. I mean, I've lived in North Texas my whole life, and I don't know. I can't remember the last time we had a new reservoir built until like I started hearing about it 5 years ago. It's built now. It's called
Really?
yeah, Bodark Lake, and it's just northeast of the Dallas area.
Huh.
Um, it's a huge lake. There's already people. Somebody caught a 9-pounder that'll be broken, right? A 9-pound bass, and they're like, "I got the lake record." Yeah, right for like 5 minutes. Wait,
Uh,
wait a second until people
there's
start
big
fishing
bass
there.
in there's big bass in Texas. That's where I caught my biggest bass ever for a long time.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I
we
got
imported Florida genetics. That's how we did it.
yeah, and you have a growing season that's pretty nice, you
Yeah.
know. It
Oh yeah.
can grow all year.
I caught a 10-2-3. That's my personal best. I caught it out of a pond. I mean, like a small lake, 10-acre, 12-acre community.
Texas.
Yeah,
That's a lake most other places.
yeah. I mean, but I never was expecting to catch a fish that big out of there. Uh, I go to Lake Fork. I can walk to this place. Um, but I didn't. I've told this story on the air. I didn't have a scale. I hadn't caught a fish worth weighing in so long that the scale was all corroded. The batteries had started to rust out in there, and so I went to go weigh it, and I was like, crap. So I had to tie the fish up and drive to Cabela's and buy a scale. And the people in line, I told them what was going on. They're like, "Let this guy cut. He's got to go weigh this fish." They all let me skip the line and buy the scale, and then hauled ass over there and weighed the thing.
That's
It
awesome.
was pretty cool. I was giddy, still giddy talking about it 5 years later. But I'll tell you, I haven't been as mad at bass ever since that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny how that happens. You know,
Uh,
you always want to break like the 10-pound barrier or something that you do, and you're okay.
yeah.
Got it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So you do. I'm assuming you said you spent most of your time in the Keys. Most of your stuff is saltwater.
Yeah, I would think most of the fishing. I like all types of fishing. Started
Uh-huh.
out as a freshwater guide in Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, fly
Oh
fishing
wow.
rivers and stuff. And then I wanted to fish year round, and that's what led me to Key West. Actually, it was trying to spend a winter in Jackson, Wyoming was what led me to Key West because it's really, really cold there. I went about as far away as you could get.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but at first I thought maybe the logical thing was to try to make a living as a trout guide year round. But that led me to like a different country, like to like, a different you needed to go to, South America or something, Patagonia, to be able to fish in the wintertime. What's the winter here? You need to go to a place where it's the summer. And that wasn't as attractive to me because I wanted to get married and have a family.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but that, I didn't even really, at first, I didn't even really think that saltwater was a possibility. But, you meet a couple of people and have a few opportunities, and you can make something like that happen.
Yeah. Oh, I love saltwater fishing. I mean, I grew up bass fishing, but I'm 5 hours from the coast. But we were down in Galveston last week, and I took all three kids, and my wife usually goes, but my parents were there. My dad's he's obsessed with fishing, so obviously he took my wife's place, and that was special for him to be on the boat with his three grandkids. And
Yeah.
he didn't care what he caught. He just was happy to see them catching. I think we didn't catch a lot of keepers. Water was really dirty. I think we caught 6 nice trout, and the kids caught a ton of little sharks and hardheads, and
Yeah.
they don't care though. They're like, I
Keep
caught a
the rod
fish.
bent, man. Keep the rod bent. That's what makes everybody happy.
Yeah. And then we're heading to your part of the world. The whole family's going. We're flying out on the 4th for Panama City. We're not staying in Panama City, somewhere outside of there. I don't know. Wife set it all up with her family. So yeah, I'm coming back to Florida, and the wife saw like the kids can't get in the water. And I'm like, okay. So getting back to sharks, where we just were in Galveston, and Galveston had 2 shark attacks already this summer.
Yeah.
But when we were down there last week, it was just life, business as usual. I had all three kids in the surf messing around,
Yeah.
and didn't really think about it, to be honest with you. I was more concerned about jellyfish. I hate getting stung by those bastards.
Yeah. I mean, you got a higher chance of getting stung by a jellyfish, I promise you, than getting a
Mm-hmm.
shark. But the sharks have been in the news. They really have been in the news lately, and for good reason. I mean, there's been a number of attacks. But they've been on my radar, for the last 6 or 7 years, because it just seems like there's just, as soon as you think, God, there just couldn't be any more sharks, like there's more, and
Mm-hmm.
it gets to where you're seeing more sharks than ever, pretty much no matter where you go. And there's a lot of there are a lot of people that just want to dispute it. They don't even want to have the discussion that there could be more sharks than
Mm-hmm.
there have been in a while. They don't even want to have the discussion because the Discovery Channel and other media has made it out that sharks are in this worldwide decline, which,
Right.
like, I'm okay with that, to say, well, I'm willing listen and to consider that global shark populations might be in an overall decline. But at the same time, you can have individual explosions of shark populations in other areas. So the overall number of sharks could possibly be going down, but it's certainly not between Maine, Key West, and Galveston, Texas.
Right.
Like that and the Bahamas, and probably way down in Mexico. The number of sharks anywhere in that entire coastline is more than I've ever seen. And, I don't get around to all those areas certainly, but more than any charter captain that I know has seen.
Well, I put it like this: Florida Panthers endangered, mountain lions across the lower 48 not endangered, right?
Right.
So, and people will say, well, mountain lions are okay. Yeah, they're endangered in the Florida Everglades, so we shouldn't have a season. We should protect them. I think we're all on board with that. But what they're doing in Colorado right now, I mean, absolutely absurd, trying to ban mountain lion hunting because there's no scientific data to support that. Actually, their big cat program leader has come out with a PowerPoint presentation explaining how hunting is vital to mountain lion management. So that's the same thing you could say globally. Sharks are in decline, but man, and I would argue on the Pacific coast too, from what people I've talked to, they seem to be doing fine there as well.
Yeah.
It's been probably a year and a half. I had Mike Leonard on of the ASA, American Sport Fishing. I'm sure you know Mike.
I know who
And
he is. I had him on my podcast yet.
yeah, but he said the same thing. Like this explosion is real. It's happening, whether people want to address it or not. So that leads to the question: why? Why are there more sharks? Did we used to kill more sharks?
Yeah, I think so. I think that you know, and I don't know this 100%, but I do know that shark finning was a thing. Like
Uh,
that was a thing that would happen. That commercial boats would go out and they would fin sharks. So they catch them long line. They cut all their fins off, mostly their dorsal fin, I think, but they cut all their fins off, and the shark goes back in the water. And it would be an incredibly good technique if that is the most valuable part of the shark, and instead of having to keep a 14-foot hammerhead, you just cut the fins off and throw it. I mean, how many fins can you put in a freezer? How long could you stay out on the water compared to having to bring, how many 14, 10, 11, 8-foot sharks can you catch before
mhm.
you're even on a massive commercial fishing boat, until you just don't have freezer space and you have to come in, right? But if you're just finning them, you could probably stay out there forever, right? And so I think that was a method of fishing that was certainly not very nice to watch. So if you got some video of that, you could easily get people riled up about, oh, you just cut the fins off the shark and threw it back in. The thing was still alive. Now what's going to happen, right? And you're doing that over and over and over again. It's pretty easy to get people to side that that's
Yeah.
a healthy way to fish, right? Um, and I think that a lot of that was cut out, and so there's not as much commercial fishing. But I mean, when I got to the Keys, we didn't see sharks. I mean, at all like we do today, not at
Uh-huh.
all. And you would go anywhere you could, you would have a shark attack a fish on the line occasionally, occasionally. Now it's every other fish in certain places.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Mike told me he doesn't even his favorite thing to do is tarpon fish, and he's like it's kind of lost its shine now because so many tarpon are being killed by the sharks.
Certainly in certain areas they are, but that also has, you have to, like, as a charter guide, and I'm sure, Mike is a great fisherman, and he's been doing it for a long, long time. So Mike is not the type of person that is going to witness two of his tarpon getting eaten in this one spot and just continue to fish there, right? He's
Mhm.
gonna he's gonna be like, we can't fish here. We're just feeding them to the sharks, right? Like
Right.
that could be considered as unethical as finning them, right? Like you're just feeding them. Every time you hook one, they get eaten. So you, as an ethical sportsman, need to go find somewhere else to fish, right?
Mhm.
And that loses its shine real fast because this spot is so good and the fish do something here that they don't do anywhere else. And you've been waiting all year to fish here. And as soon as you hook one, it gets eaten by a shark. Like
Yeah.
that does lose its,
Mhm.
it's not real fun, you know, because the reason that we all do it is because we love the tarpon, man. Like it- nobody likes to, I mean, I don't know. A good ethical captain does not like to see that happen. It's exciting, but it's not something you want to see happen. It's like your baby getting eaten by a grizzly bear. Like it's
Yeah.
not what you want.
It's like a trout guide, like on a stream or river, like watching his client keep trout.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, pretty much like you work so hard for them and then all of a sudden, boom, it's over. But
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, it does tend to this whole situation is larger, I think, than the sharks and especially when you get into like the tarpon fishermen, like being upset at other tarpon fishermen for the way that they're fishing. It has a tendency to divide a group of anglers that should, you know, by all, you know, logic, should certainly have a lot more in common than not.
Right.
And that's where it's pretty dangerous when to start the infighting between a group that should be united, because that's where you lose your fishing rights.
Yeah. So dive in a little deeper on that. What are the tarpon guys fighting over?
Well, I mean, you'll have like maybe some will be upset that somebody continues to fish in a place where they get attacked by sharks.
Okay.
Maybe for whatever reason, maybe that's all that guy knows. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't have a lot of spots. Maybe he's only fishing a half day and he can only go so far away from the dock. I don't know. But other people would be like, no, you shouldn't fish them there because they always get attacked by sharks. And so you'll have these two groups of similar people that both
Mhm.
love the tarpon, and they they start fighting amongst one another. You'll see it.
Yeah.
You'll see it in ways that tarpon fishermen fish. In Boca Grande, there are people that like to live bait, and there are people that like to do this thing that they call jigging, which sounds nice, but it's this heavy jig. And you know, the controversy is that they are snagging the fish, right?
Uh,
So they're not really getting the fish to bite. They're going over a school of fish, raising it up. Somehow this is hooking them somehow in the side of the face, or a lot of times it does get them in the mouth because the line will come across their mouth and then they'll reel tight and it'll catch them in the side of the mouth. I don't know. I'm not a jigger,
yeah.
and we don't have that type of fishing where I fish, but it takes this group of fishermen that love to fish in this Boca Grande channel, and it splits them into mortal enemies.
Yeah.
Not
Wow.
healthy.
Snagging fish is not. I mean, it's not my cup of tea.
That's right. It's certainly not. And that is exactly how some fishermen think. They're doing is snagging fish. It's very damaging to the fishery. I tend to agree that that's not the best, but at the same time, it's like, man, can't we find some common ground here? Because typically, if the FWC or whatever, NOAA, whoever, whatever governing body is left to the decision, okay, we're going to have to go out and get in the middle of these groups of anglers, and we're going to have to kind of regulate this. And how many people is it going to take to do that? Are we going to need 3 or 4 boats out there? You know what's easier is just to close the whole thing down.
Right.
There's only this situation these 3 months of the year. Why don't we just say no fishing at that time of the year? Right? That's what I always just kind of that's what I try to avoid at all costs is protect your right to fish, right? Like,
Mm.
and your right to go there, because it's easy to be taken away, and it has been taken away. And sometimes it's
Well,
taken away and they say that, oh, we're going to reopen this in a couple of years after we do this study. And then 19 years later, it's still closed.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you know.
There
So
was a group of Michigan coyote hunters. I don't know if you heard about this, but so the houndsmen were getting pissed because they thought the thermal hunters, the night hunters, were killing too many coyotes. And so they went to Michigan DNR or whatever their governing body is and filed a petition. And they got the season closed for 3 months out of the year. So instead of a year-long season, now they have a 9-month season for everybody. And the coyote, the houndsmen, were the ones that did it. It's like, wow, you just shot yourself in the foot. How
they think
stupid.
that
And
did they think that that was a victory for them?
they did. They're the ones that wanted it. It's like, hey, guys, FYI, if you get stuff taken away, you might as well be an anti-hunter because that's who's on your team. Look at who's fighting with you.
That's
You think it's
exactly.
other hunters?
I see that so clearly that once, you know, it's divide and conquer, and the anti-fishing, anti-hunting groups are smart like that. They really are. If they can get fishermen or hunters to fight amongst themselves, their battle is that much easier.
Yeah. We had this happen in Texas over the last 2 years. There's this group, Texans for Mountain Lions. And the face of it is this guy. We have cease and desists against each other, so I won't say his name. I just call him Voldemort. And he's a filmmaker and he claims to be a hunter and maybe he shoots a deer every year. I don't know. Don't really care. When it came down to who was speaking with him, his constituents, defenders of wildlife, humane society, people that have financed anti-coyote hunting films. It's like, where are the hunters that are siding up with you? And you look around and there's maybe one or two, but everyone else is like, dude. But he claims that he's a hunter and an outdoorsman, and that adds validity to the other side's claim that, look, this guy's a hunter and he says what y'all are doing is wrong. And they Texas Parks and Wildlife conceded and gave them mandatory trap checks and one other stipulation. But before that, we didn't have any mountain lion regulations. It's like, why do we want to put more regulations on ourselves? Much like you're saying that the shark fishery is very healthy. Well, that must mean that the snook fishery, the snook fishery is healthy. Well, okay, there's lots of food for the shark. Guess what we do in Texas? Manage for whitetail deer.
Yeah.
I mean, that is what we do. And they don't think that these lions it's a freaking whitetail deer buffet anywhere they go. And pigs. I mean, the food source is limitless. So to think that mountain lions are not thriving, but the dude made this film and it was like it painted this picture. It was a beautifully shot film on Texas wildlife. But the underlying theme was people are trapping and killing mountain lions indiscriminately. I know very few Texans who have ever seen a mountain lion, much less killed one.
Right.
Because mountain lions are so reclusive. But
Seems like it'd be tough
anyway,
to trap. Are
be
they
tough
trap?
to trap. Oh yeah, you can trap them. But
That
the
how
people,
have a
that
way
can
to
do
go
it.
get them? I mean, I know they hunt them with dogs, and so
Yeah,
I've never been mountain lion hunting, but it seems like a smart animal. Like
it
and
is
smart animals are really hard to trap.
exactly. And so the skill level required is a very elite, exclusive group of folks that are even capable of doing it.
Well, I would
Like
imagine. Well, it's not like you're just going to go put a trap out there and leave your scent all over it and expect a mountain lion to
right.
step in there.
Yeah. But this is how it starts, right? This is like, do you think 30 years ago, Coloradans would wake up and be like, wow, in 2024, we're going to be fighting for our right to even harvest or kill a mountain lion? I don't think they would have.
Hmm.
Do you? 30 years ago?
No, I doubt it. I don't
Right.
know. I mean, I don't live in Colorado, but
Sure.
I don't know what the population was like 30 years ago. I would imagine it was healthy, but I would imagine that
Right.
there's more now, right?
Yeah. But that's how it starts is, it's across all of the West. I mean, Washington State, California, Oregon, they all want to protect wolves and bears and mountain lions. And then you see it show up somewhere like Texas. You're like, oh my God, this is everywhere. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Maybe more shark fin soup. We should bring that back.
Well, I mean, honestly, I mean that you say that somewhat in jest, I think, but um, there have been a lot of people that ask, and lately I've been talking more about the shark population, and because of the recent attacks, and that's just kind of what people want to talk about, I guess. But the solution, you know, you don't have to have any kind of crazy solution. I mean, just let the commercial guys do it. Commercial fishermen are so good at what they do. You give them the chance and give them a price that is worth their time, you don't have any problem.
Mm.
Like they are so good at what they do that, in fact, they can be too good at what they do.
Right.
You're probably going to need to restrict the gear that they use or whatever, but those guys are so good at their job, and if there is money to be made and there are targets to be had, they will get them, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to do some kind of crazy thing. Like just let the just open up the season, man, and the commercial guys will do the rest. They're perfectly happy at doing it. They can catch anything in the ocean. They're really good at what they do.
Yeah.
And that's all they need. I mean, if we want to decrease the number of sharks, just let the commercial guys have more.
But what would the monetary value be? Because I don't know that shark fin soup was a huge thing in the United States. A lot of that
It
stuff
wasn't. It
is an
wasn't. A
Asian
lot of
market.
that, yeah, the Asian market, I think. But you know, there's probably plenty of people of Asian descent in the United States that maybe grew up on it. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's I'm sure that there's some sort of market, but a lot of times you have to like create a market for things like this. And we have another species which is slightly different, but in the Florida Keys we have the lionfish.
Oh yeah.
And it's not just in the Florida Keys, it's all over the place. And I don't exactly know how this happened. A lot of people say that it's from aquariums that like you'll have these big aquariums and then they're circulating water. And I guess the lionfish are, you know, putting out fertilized eggs and it's somehow getting into the main ocean. However it happens, there's a lot of lionfish. And in from wherever they're from, they have some predators. When they hit our reefs, they don't really have any predators.
Mm-hmm.
And so they pretty much all the little reef fish, they're in an area where they're thriving, just like the python in the Everglades, right? The python in the Everglades, it has a 365-day growing season. It has tons of things to eat, and it's a perfect environment for it. No predators other than people. Well, the lionfish is another one where we're trying to figure out like how do you get rid of this thing? And one of the ways that has been somewhat effective is to show people that they're actually pretty good to eat.
Right.
And so they're really easy to spear. You have to be careful and understand how to handle them because they do, and it's not a myth. They have a poisonous spine on them and it can cause you some really bad issues if you get yourself in the hand or whatever. But they've come up with these different things like a PVC tube, and you spear the lionfish and you stick it in this PVC tube, and there's like a, you know, a cover, you know, you push it down in there, and then when you pull it out, the lionfish stays in the tube and you never touch it with your hand and all's good. But, you know, a lot of restaurants will now have the lionfish and it
Mm.
becomes something that people want. Like, oh, I want to get the lionfish appetizer.
Yeah.
And so you kind of create a market for it. I think that you could probably do the same thing with sharks. I went to this thing at the Tennessee Aquarium one time, and it had this Alton Brown, famous chef. You know who he is?
Mm-mm.
Anyway, it's like on TV, Iron Chef or whatever. And he's doing this thing for trying to create recipes, kind of like Paul Prudhomme did for the blackened redfish. And when
Yeah.
Paul Prudhomme created this blackened redfish recipe, it was really good, and everybody wanted it. And so there became a high price on the redfish. Commercial fishermen go out, oh, you want redfish? We'll catch those. And the redfish are a fish that can be caught so effectively by using an airplane and a purse net, a purse seine, right? So they get in these big balls certain times of the year. You know, in Texas, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like right on the surface, and you fly over with an airplane. Oh, there they are, right there. You give somebody the coordinates. They lay a net right around the whole thing, pull it, and they get every single one of them. And you know, that's a way that in certain types of commercial fishing, the gear and the tactics are just too effective, right? You
Right.
will take those things to extinction if you continue to do that. Well, they almost did that with redfish.
Yeah.
And
We had to, I think in the 80s in Texas, we made them a sport fish.
yeah,
You
same
couldn't
thing in Florida.
commercial. Yeah.
But I mean, when I first started guiding in Florida, it was really hard to catch redfish. You
Huh.
go out right now, you catch 30 of them immediately. I mean, it's really good now because they were somewhat protected. But this guy, Alton Brown, he was trying to do something similar to what happened with the redfish, which is a perfectly natural native species, almost taken to extinction because it was so desirable on the plate. So he's, when I went to this thing at the aquarium, they had this nice dinner, and he was making those Asian carp that are in the Illinois River in
Oh my gosh.
those things that jump out of the water. And I
Yeah.
mean, they go over, right? And he was like, well, how's the best way to get rid of those? What if they were good on the plate? What if they were good on the plate and people wanted to eat them? Then we would go there, we would get them, and we'd probably manage that fishery pretty well.
Uh-huh.
So he was trying to create this, and I gotta say they were pretty good the way he cooked them. I mean, he's a
Mm.
great chef. The way I might make it, it might taste like old fish, but
Right.
it was pretty good the way he did it. But I mean, I think that might be what needs to happen, but I
Mm.
don't know. I mean, you can do a lot with sharks. You can make dog food, cat food, makeup, um, anything that has fish oil in it. I'm sure you can make that out of sharks. Um, there's a market for them
Yeah.
somewhere. Protein, right? It's pure protein.
Hmm.
And so I'm sure there's a market. And you can even make shark deterrent out of sharks. We did a show many years ago, and these
That's
guys,
interesting.
they were trying to make this, shark deterrent. So if you're down there diving and the sharks come in and they get real aggressive, you could pop this thing open like a kind of like one of those like the SEALs have for to designate their landing zone, like the color, all that colored smoke comes out, so their helicopter knows where to land.
Hmm.
It looked like that. They popped this thing, and all this stuff would come out underwater, and it was made out of sharks. And
Huh.
it's still one of the grossest things I've ever seen in my life. But he asked us to come over and check it out, and it was like off the side of the road in the Keys. It was the summertime, and we were going to go and film how he makes this stuff. And he would take a bunch of sharks and he would put them in a 55-gallon drum and then put the top on it and then let it sit there for a month.
Sounds like bear bait.
Oh, it was the worst thing ever. And so I still have the video of him doing this, but he'd open this thing up and he was like,
Ugh.
oh, I mean, even he couldn't deal with it. And we were just like, holy cow. But anyway, that's what they made the shark deterrent out of. They would take that stuff, they would filter it out, they would make something around. And that has always been kind of the local legend kind of, myth, I guess, is that if sharks were coming in, like the yellowtailers, if they were getting all their yellowtail eaten by sharks, these guys would stay out there for days catching these yellowtail, and they'd catch the shark that was eating them, and then they would cut it open and feed it back to the other sharks,
Huh.
and all the sharks would go away.
Huh.
And my commercial fishing friend said that he grew up doing this when he was a kid, and he said that it makes the sharks not feel good. They get he just said they get a stomach ache and they go away.
Interesting.
But
More
that was,
people need to do that then.
I guess.
Have your
I mean,
rancid
there is
shark
a
remnants.
legal. You can catch it. You can catch and keep sharks. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people think that you can't, but you can in Florida. I think it's one per person a day, I think. And you know,
Like per species or just one shark?
um, I don't know that because I rarely keep them myself. Um, or I don't keep them myself, mostly because of the size of them.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, fishing either a 17-foot boat or a 24-foot boat, and you know, if you catch a 8-foot lemon shark at 10 o'clock in the morning, I mean, what are you going to do with it? Like
Right.
it's going to need to sit in your boat or something. I don't know. Like I just don't. I like catching sharks. I like fishing for sharks, but
Mhm.
I just don't really have any reason to keep them.
Back to those lionfish though. I saw a photo one time of like some dudes on a boat in the Keys. They had like 500 or 600 of them stacked up on their boat, and so I found out who they were, and I had them on the show, and they were talking about those tournaments they do to
Was it
try
Tony
to
Young?
do what?
Tony Young?
Yeah. It was Tony. It was Tony.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tony, good friend. He's great at that. The reason why I asked if it was him is because
Yeah.
he wins the majority of those tournaments.
Yeah,
He
it
is
was definitely him. Yeah.
a fish killer.
Yeah. And then they take those fish to the restaurants, which is a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And and they'll do this thing. It looks really nice on the plate. They cut off the poisonous fins and they'll deep fry the whole thing. And it's got it almost looks like a big flower. And it's this whole big presentation that comes out and I
uh-huh.
don't know, it's pretty good.
Yeah,
Honestly. I mean, it's a good fish to eat.
I've heard that. Yeah, that's what he said, like white, flaky meat. So,
Yeah, but
um,
the guy he just stays down there and just punishes those lionfish.
good.
Yeah, he is really, really good at it.
Uh-huh.
We just did a show with him recently where
I'll
he
have
was
to check that out.
above water.
Huh.
It's strange for Tony. He's mostly an underwater guy, but
Yeah.
he can handle a rod
Huh.
also.
I spent a night with, it's like this weird subculture of fishermen, and it's the hardcore shark guys that fish off the pier all night.
Hmm.
And my buddy and I went down to the coast for trout and redfish, and we were gonna do a guided night shark fishing on pins, and the guide canceled last minute. I was like, crap. So we just went to the pier, and these guys like adopted us for the night and just like showed us and the gear they had was, I mean, ridiculous. And they had one dude that for $10 would jump off the end of the pier, which I'm pretty sure was illegal, and he had a kayak down there, and he would paddle your bait out like a mile, and then he'd come back.
10 bucks.
And yeah, like $10. Jump off into the black abyss, and like we don't know where he went, but he showed up, 15 minutes later, and your bait was way out there. But those guys are hardcore. I mean, like Red Bull, and I don't know when they ever sleep. But they were passionate about it, and
Yeah,
but they did keep. I think we caught like a 6-foot bull shark, and they kept it and cut it up,
sure it was
took it
great.
home for steaks. Yeah,
Sure it was good to eat.
uh-huh. Yeah, but I don't know. Most people don't. Yeah, what are you gonna do with a shark that's 12 feet long? I don't know.
I don't know. Have to ask Mark the Shark. He gets them all the time. Do you know about Mark the Shark?
Uh-uh.
He's a great follow on Instagram if you're interested. Mark the Shark is a Miami charter boat captain that well known for killing sharks, and he has been very controversial because he
Kills them.
a lot of sharks, brings puts them on Instagram. Um, but lately, people have been rethinking his position because I mean he's been doing this for 30 years and he's never deviated, not even a little bit. He's a funny guy though because he's one of my favorite podcasts I ever did because he's a real he's a real complicated dude. Like he kills more sharks than anybody, but he also tags more sharks than anyone and does all this good conservation work with
Huh.
NOAA and all these other organizations. Then he kills a whole bunch of sharks and he kind of has this kind of heartless attitude, but then he takes these sharks and he donates them to the homeless shelter. And then I don't know, he's just got all these different things on these different ends of the spectrum. It's like a complicated dude. And but the one thing about him that has my respect immediately is that dude fishes like 3 half days a day, 300 days a year.
Wow. Huh.
I'm a worker, dude. He works, works. He is on that boat just nonstop.
Well, it
And
sounds like he has the right mindset from a conservation standpoint. Yeah, you're going to take some, but here I'm also going to tag these
right.
and invest in research.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Yeah,
that's
that
wonderful.
sounds good the way that you say it, but the way that he says it is like, ah, killed this one, yes, and then he doesn't show all the conservation. You have
Uh-huh.
to ask him that, right? But I like the guy. I think he's an interesting guy. He gets a lot of heat from a lot of people, but I can see that dude's a hardcore fisherman,
I'm going to
and
follow him. I like
yeah,
unapologetic folks. I don't like.
he's on a
I'm
pod.
not personally
You should
going
get him
to.
on a podcast. I'll
Yeah.
set
Oh yeah.
it.
I'm not the type to like rub it in your face, or maybe I am. I don't know. I've had guys on who say, "I just like to kill stuff." I'm like, that's not really the message I'm personally putting out there. But at the end of the day, I've shot a giraffe. I put that stuff all over my social media. I don't care. If it bothers you, don't follow, don't look. I don't care. But let's talk about one other fish that's been in the news just recently. Our red snapper season in federal waters in Texas started June 1st, I believe, and I think it's still open. I was looking before our discussion. I haven't seen that it closed. Now, when I was in college, I'm 42, so God, 20 years ago now, one of my best buddies, his dad had an offshore boat, still does, out of Port Aransas, and we would go red snapper fishing. And back then, it wasn't a big deal. We had I think maybe the season was a month or whatever. And then when I started this show 15 years ago, we'd get notified the season is a week, and then it would be 3 days, and it'd be what the hell's going on? So I've had our coastal fisheries director, Robin Rikers, on a bunch of times over the years, and we've made progress to where the feds aren't really hammering us like they did the entire Atlantic coast.
Mhm.
We have this great season now, but we had to fight for that, and it really doesn't make sense that the entire Atlantic snapper population would be managed as one, because, for example, the snapper that live off the oil reefs off the coast of Texas are not migrating to Georgia or Florida or wherever. They're pretty static. There's no mass migration of these fish. They stay there year round. So to manage them as one Gulf Coast population or one Atlantic population seems asinine. I think the states have been fighting for management of the snapper off of their coast, essentially. But you guys got shafted. I saw a 1-day season for July 12th. A
Yeah,
1-day season.
that's going to make a lot of people really upset because you can go to certain places and the only fish you catch is a red snapper.
Right.
Like you're trying to catch mutton snapper and you only catch red snapper.
Uh-huh.
You would think, well, the mutton snapper is the one that's endangered but they're there too, but the red snapper is more aggressive, right? So you just
Yeah.
get in areas where they are and you'll end up catching that red snapper. But they've obviously made a tremendous comeback. And there are tons of them. And when we go to fish in Louisiana, that's where, I mean, you can get them right up to the surface and you could literally catch them with a bare hook, I think. And so you can certainly catch them with a bare jig, something that's gonna hold something on it. But um, that's an interesting thing. I don't know how they determine what the laws are. Um, but there are things that anglers are doing to try to help, because one of the things that happens with the red snapper and an issue that we have is the barotrauma, right? So you bring it up, they blow up a little bit, and sometimes their eyes pop out, sometimes their stomach comes out, and it's fine if it's a legal fish and you bring it up and that's the one you're going to keep and it's within the season, right? But I don't know if you guys use descending devices there. Do you do that?
No. I mean, I know what they are, but
Well, the descending device, just so your listeners know what it is it could be made out of a coat hanger and a weight. It could be, there's nothing really fancy about it. Some people even would have like a milk carton, a milk crate, and some weights, something that will deliver that fish back down to the depth or near the depth that it came from. And what has been shown is that, and any of those things could be a descending device. Now, there are more fancy ones that are manufactured now. They look like a boga grip. You put it in their mouth. It goes down when the pressure hits a certain, you can set it for 100, 150, 200 feet.
mm,
And if it's set for 200 feet, when it gets down to 200 feet, something, the pressure of the water pushes on this device and then the jaws open up and it lets the fish off. Okay. So, the descending device is something that, whether it's a homemade one or a manufactured one, has been really pretty good for conservation, because say you're not supposed to keep them, but you go out there and you catch 8 of them and they all float off, right?
right.
That's not good, right? And so there is some monitoring, I think, or at least they're thinking in some way that there is the catch that is reported, and then there's this other catch that, might not be reported. And they're trying to put all this data together in a way that makes sense for them to open a season or to close a season or to have 1-day season or a 10-day season or a whole summer season. And so anglers have really started to use these descending devices in Florida anyway, where we're fishing, as kind of a conservation method of, if you get this fish up and it's got barotrauma, if you put it on the descending device and get it back down, and we'll put GoPros on these things. So like that would be the first question I would ask if I had never used one. How do you know it
Right.
works? Right. But you have a GoPro on these things and it'll take it down and then it'll let it come off. And you can see that fish's eyes will go back into its head. You can see that its stomach will go back in. It'll get down to 200 feet. It'll break off this thing and it'll swim off.
Huh.
Uh, and so I think those are really important, like for anybody that wants to see the red snapper fishing open for a longer period in the future. I think that's one thing that you can do, is to that's one controllable thing that we as anglers can do, is just use those things. And in certain places, it's mandatory that you have one on the boat, whether you use it or not. That's up to you, I guess, but you have to actually have one.
Yeah.
And so a venting tool is another one, but the venting tool is like a horse needle or anything that you can poke a hole into the swim bladder of the fish and let all the air out. And then you can get the fish to go down, because what happens is that barotrauma builds up, they blow up like a balloon. And then they don't have any mechanism to get that gas out unless you manually push it out, push a hole in it, which is you're putting a hole in the fish also. It's like stabbing you in the stomach, I guess. So the less kind of damaging thing is to put them on one of these descending devices and have them go down. So you have another rod set up with this. So you catch them on this one rod, but you have this other rod set up with a big weight and a descending device. And if it's too small or out of season or whatever, you just hook it on there and drop it down with the other rod, then reel up the weight. But that is a way that I think you can, at least put a few things in your favor as far as the red snapper, and maybe in the future having a longer season.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, for now, as it stands, though, it's July 12th and it's North Carolina to the Everglades. One fish. It's one fish, I think, in 1-day season and one fish. Like,
yeah. And for most people, it'll take them 3 minutes to catch that fish.
but then
Right?
what if it's really windy that day? That's the other thing, which I always hated when we would have a 3 or 4-day or a 1 weekend season. Like we drive all the way down there to the coast and then be like, well, it's 8-foot rollers. We're not going. It's like, well, that's great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. They don't give you a rain check.
You have over 300,000 Instagram followers on your podcast channel. So I want to talk about that because I don't know if you touch politics or guns or any of these social issues. I do, and in 2020 I had 150,000-ish followers. 4 years later I have 160,000.
Yeah.
And so they completely turned the lights out on me. And I don't know if fishing is targeted the way that hunting is. Is your page still growing?
Definitely not like hunting. Hunting, I feel like, is you got a target on your back with the social media platforms, guns especially. But fishing doesn't seem to be targeted right now. I mean, I think I'd prefer to fly under the radar a little bit and making the Instagram people upset. But right as of now, it doesn't have the target on its back. But that is something that everyone I know that is in the fishing business, especially the people who make their living on YouTube, it's always in the back of their mind. Like all it takes is for them to change the rules or to change something, and all this content could not be monetized. It might allow it on there, but it wouldn't be monetized. And so I don't know, man. Like that's a hard one because on the one hand, it's a free platform. I like that. So you're playing by their rules. I get that. But I don't like it that something could be just changed overnight. And we have had that happen. I mean, one of our, it was back a while ago with Facebook, when Facebook was much bigger. and woke up one morning, go to see the Facebook page. It's not on there. Like it's
Mm,
just gone. And I didn't know that that could happen, but it did. And we did manage to get it back. But it was, I mean, it's just like all of a sudden it's just there one day and it's gone the
yeah,
next.
that
That's
happened in
different.
my Instagram.
Was it? Did
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
It
and
just
that
gone.
it just gone, just come, just bye. I went to go post a story. I was duck hunting, and it was like beautiful sunrise and the decoys and the lab and everything, and took this nice photo. I was like, oh, I'll put that on my story. No, gone. It was
Hmm.
gone for 30 days. No explanation. Um,
No
had to get
phone call. No, nobody to call,
There's
right?
there's no recourse. That's the thing. You were saying it could all just go away one day. Well, it did, and then it's like, then you have sponsors being like, "Hey, we need to renegotiate our contract." I'm like,
Yeah.
so
How do you manage to get that back when you can't get in touch with anyone, or like what?
had to go through a sponsor that spends a lot of money with Meta,
Mhm.
and they were able to finally get someone to be like, "Hey, this dude's page is." I found out that nobody with over 100,000 followers, they didn't know at the time, had ever lost their page like that and not gotten it back. That seemed to
Mm.
be the magic number. So I don't know if
Wow.
there's any validity to that, but that's what they said. And just to have no recourse, like that was this. That's when I realized, wow, we are living on borrowed time, essentially. Certainly for hunting. I don't know. Taking social media out of the equation, though, hunting's under attack, full court press by the antis in all 50 states. Do you think that is going to happen with fishing?
Well, I don't know about the full court press, but I do see it happening, and you have seen it happen over the years, even with bass tournaments. I mean, I remember when people were they were holding hands across the boat ramp,
Mm,
trying to protest these professional bass fishing tournaments, which I mean, come on, man. Like bass fishing is where catch and release came from.
right.
Professional bass tournaments. Like it is the heart of conservation. But, you know, people don't and I've even heard some hunters, some pretty established hunters really not like catch and release fishing because it's like playing ping pong with a life, right? Like, and that comes from a hunter. And so I don't know. I mean, I guess I can understand what they're saying, but at the same time, it's, catch and release fishing has allowed so many more people to get into and enjoy the sport of fishing. And for it to like you just take any river near any sort of a tourist area out west. Like the river I guided on was the South Fork of the Snake River. It was near Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It was near Idaho Falls. It was, near a couple of population centers. And it had a number of guides on it and a number of recreational people. And if everyone there had taken 2 fish a day, there would be nothing in that river. Like it
Mm-hmm.
would be so empty. There's no possible way that I mean, a lot of times you say, well, nobody with a fly rod is going to damage this fishery. Well, not one person, but 10,000 people, taking, 2 fish, that's 20,000 fish gone out of that river, right? And it
Yeah.
probably more than that. I mean, I don't know. But the point being is that catch and release fishing has been responsible for getting a lot of people into the sport of fishing, having them enjoy the sport of fishing, and then care enough about the sport of fishing to, you know, either vote in a way that it protects the areas that they care about, or give money to an organization that is doing work to protect the area that they care about, or going out on their own and picking up trash along a river, like actually getting out there. The people that don't care about that, they don't spend that, they don't give their money, they
Right.
don't spend their time cleaning the thing up. They don't make sure that a condo development doesn't come in on they're the ones putting the condo development up, right? Like fishermen and hunters are the cornerstone of conservation, because we are the ones that actually care that this place doesn't change, right? It's full of giant turkeys or giant deer or giant fish or giant whatever you're into. We want to keep it that way. Keep the development out, keep everything else out. And so I think that fishing is under attack to a degree, but not to the degree of hunting, not even
Mm.
close.
Mhm.
But
Well, I
it's
hope
all
it stays that way.
because when then that's how we started this conversation of like, if you get a group of people that cares about a certain fishery and they get split and they start fighting amongst one another, it's pretty easy to just close it, or I don't know, for the anti group to come in and impose some sort of restriction, or to impose some sort of a of pressure on the lawmaker to, isn't it easier just to close it down?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with everything you said, but I do want to. The only thing that I think we have to be careful of is say, so like for bass, like I I don't really ever keep bass unless it's a private stock tank and you start catching them and all the fish are the same size and you're like, well, this population's stunted, so now we have a stringer of 25 bass and we're gonna have a fish fry. But other than that, I typically let them go. But the amount of flack I get from people when I would post the picture of that stringer of bass on social media, oh, why are you killing bass? Why? I'm like, because I like big bass, and so now I had to take some out of this pond to, you know, invigorate the growth rate.
Mhm.
So, but then that's the thing I think we have to be careful of, and is saying, well, it's if you're not catching and releasing, if you're keeping fish, then that's bad, because it's not always true.
It's not true at all, I don't think. I think
Mhm.
that there are plenty of places where keeping fish is, like in the situation you just outlined, that is good for the health of the whole fishery. If you left those fish in there, they're all going to be a pound and a half. Every
Mhm.
fish in the lake will be a pound and a half.
Right.
If you get a lot of those out, you can maybe grow some big fish.
Mhm.
But that's just a small pond. But in the ocean, yellowtail snapper, you go out there rod and reel fishing for yellowtail snapper, probably a really good chance that you and me and all of our friends are not going to decimate the population of yellowtail snapper. Now there are other fish that maybe it's not as wise a choice to, they're a slower growing fish. I don't know. Maybe it's not as they're fish that are perfectly targeted
I
to
saw a
eat.
post on your Instagram. It was just this dude, a couple guys on a boat deck with a pile of Goliath grouper.
That's an old photo from this
Right.
guy that I had on the podcast. Yeah, that was his dad. He was he was a commercial fisherman. And that's a great example of one that, the technique, the tactic, a little too good for that particular fish.
Mm-hmm.
You could go down there with power heads, and that's a day of work for those guys.
Yeah.
And they were getting paid, right? They're getting paid. So what do you think they're going to do tomorrow?
Same
Next,
thing.
next. Yeah. Instead of going out and spearing, I don't know, 20 fish like this, they can power head one of those 300-pound Goliath groupers and keep going.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
the first time I ever had a grouper sandwich was at a Hooters in Clearwater, Florida. I was there for I think my brother had a soccer tournament. I think that's where the original Hooters was, but we went there and was like, "Ooh, grouper sandwich! This is great." I don't know. That was 20 something years ago, maybe
well,
longer
in the
than that.
Keys, the grouper was called the Jewfish for a long time, and then
Right.
it changed to the Goliath grouper. But there's a famous restaurant in Key West where he made the best Jewfish sandwich, right? Like, I mean, that whole restaurant was all about that. You go in there and
Yeah.
get a sandwich. And I mean, that was great fish for them because, they could buy one off the dock. That was the whole day, right? Like they just get another one every day and eat that
Mm.
whole thing with Jewfish sandwiches, right?
Yeah.
Fried Jewfish. It's fantastic. I think
Yeah.
I've never.
I don't know what type of grouper
But
I've
they
eaten,
they
but
did open that season this year. There is a when we're talking about the red snapper and what's to happen with the seasons there and went to one day and will it ever open up? Well, the Goliath grouper season has been closed in Florida for many, 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 many years, probably since that picture you saw. And they were, their numbers were lower, and their numbers are very high now. But they opened a season a couple years ago that allowed for 200 permits, and the permits, you could buy the permit and you could catch a fish of a certain size. It was pretty small. Um, but I thought that was really good. And I had someone on my podcast from uh, a biologist, and I was asking them about how they do the seasons, how they would possibly determine that it was okay. And they were like, well, on this one, we pretty much had to, the FWC pretty much had to go by observation and angler reports. So, because there is no catch data over the last 20 years, they haven't, they didn't have catch data yet. They still opened a season, which seemed really, really strange to me that they would do that unless the observational reports and the catch reports are just swayed so far that there's so many of these fish that they need, let's at least experiment with a season. And they were pretty careful about how they did it. They said, we're just going to do it this year. May not do it again. We may double down next year. We may make the fish bigger. We just don't know what we're going to do yet. But I did think that it was pretty open-minded approach to open the season, for that no catch data for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And me tons of catch data for the red snapper.
Yeah. So this other guy, his name's Mikey Subotic or something. He's a guide out of North Carolina, and somebody had sent me this regulatory proposal. It might have been passed into law, but they want harvest reporting on every sea trout caught. And we call them specks down here in my part of the world, but essentially every trout, they want you to report it. And I'm like, I was messaging Mikey about coming on the podcast to talk about it. He's like, I don't know if I really want to make them a villain. Like, I want them to still, be friendly towards me. I said, what do you think they're going to do with that data? They're going to use it for you or against you? And he was like, yeah, there's probably only one way they're going to use the data. And that's the scary thing. So I don't know.
Well, I mean,
since
you
I've been
say
doing
that,
this,
that's the way that it seems like, that's the way you maybe have the tendency to lean that way, that the data is only going to be used against you. But on the other hand, they opened this Goliath grouper. I was really happy to see that, but it gave me a lot of hope for a lot of things, that it would open a season like that based only on observational data, which, I kind of thought maybe they wouldn't just hold it against you. I mean, I don't think that the FWC or the people that are making the fishing regulations are evil or bad or wrong. I just think that they have a way that they make those regulations, and maybe we don't always understand what they are or agree with them, but that's the way they're doing it. I don't think that they're trying necessarily to make everybody upset. I think actually angler approval is part of the deal. Like, that's one of the measurements, right? So
my heart is hardened because I'm coming from, like, I love fishing. It was my first love, but as I got into hunting, I do less fishing, and honestly, it was harder for me to make any money off of the fishing industry. So that's why the show is probably 80-20 fishing to hunting to fishing, where when I started it was probably 50-50. But I see a completely different approach from the hunting side of things. Like, wildlife management agencies have been infiltrated by anti-hunters across the board. And so I'm very skeptical. Like if they, for example, one of the demands this Texans for Mountain Lions group wanted was mandatory harvest reporting. We were like, unequivocally, absolutely no way in hell, because they will not use that they will use it against us.
right.
And I truly believe that to be the case. Now, fishing, Texas Parks and Wildlife has done a pretty good job. I mean, hell, we have an amazing bass fishery. They stock all of our reservoirs. I mean, they're doing a great job.
That program they have where you take the real big one and
Mhm.
and then they get the genetics out of that real
Oh,
big.
yeah.
What is it called? It's like
It's the Share Lunker program.
Cheryl Lunker program. I think
Yeah.
that's incredibly successful in Texas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But so one thing that we just did, we had a 10 fish trout limit when I started this show. Then it went to 5. This year it went to 3. Okay. I personally don't really have a problem with that because I know how many fish got freezer burned. Like, how 6 fish is enough to feed my family and then some. What if it was, 30? I don't need 30 trout. I really don't need 15 trout. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I
Is
think
that per person or per boat?
it's three per person. So where if you, me, and a buddy went out, we could have caught 30 when I started this. Then it would have been 15, and now it's 9. And 9 is enough, I think. And I asked the guide that took the kids and my dad and I out. It's like, how is this affecting your business? He's like, it's not. People still want to fish. And I'm thinking, okay, so do we get a discount on the amount of bait we're using? Because you ain't using as much bait, and you're not using as much fuel, and your days are getting shorter. I mean, of course, I didn't ask him that, but I was thinking, I don't think the guide's really, probably on the surface at first when you hear that, they're like, oh no, this is going to hurt business. But people still want to fish, so it hasn't.
Yeah, and fishing, is one of those things where, if you shoot your limit of ducks and you're out in the field and you're still shooting and the game warden walks up and you're like, oh no, I'm shooting behind him on purpose. Like
Right.
I just want to I just want to burn some powder. You're going to be in big trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that is the one thing about fishing is that you can continue to fish, and as long as you're not in possession of over your limit, you're good. Well, what is
Yeah.
possession? Yes, you could argue.
Mm.
If you have, 9 trout in the cooler and somebody catches one and it's now in the boat, are you over your limit or not? But you can continue to catch and release fish or fish for different species or, change
Right.
it right around the boat. I mean, a lot of things are, it can be, you can still have a really great day where I guess hunting, you got to call it a day. You got to get out
Yeah.
of it's the law.
Yeah. Um, as we're wrapping things up here, tell us a little bit about your podcast and your TV show and kind of all the stuff that you have going on. And I don't know, what is your main outlet, if it's your TV show
I think it's a
or.
TV show. So I started Saltwater Experience after doing a tournament career. Me and my partner Rich Tudor, we were fishing in the professional redfish tournaments, and I didn't really want to be away from home like that anymore. I had 2 babies at home, and I'm coming all the way over to where you are, and
Mm,
trying to beat the Texas guys in a redfish tournament in their own water. It's really optimistic. Uh, but I had a hurricane. I think it was Hurricane Charlie, I think, and we were fishing in Louisiana, and that hurricane came right over Key West. My family was down there, and I just decided I'm done with this. Not going to be traveling like this anymore. I'll just go back to being a fishing guide, not leaving home. And there were about 400 silent miles between me and my partner after I had delivered that news to him, and then we started to talk, and he was kind of like, "Well, if we weren't going to do the tournaments, then what do you think we could do?" I had done some TV shows um, just as a guest, and it's pretty naive, I guess, because I just thought, well, I guess we could do a TV show. And he's like, "What do you know about doing a TV show?" So I don't know, on a bunch of them, and doesn't look that hard. Uh, which it was pretty naive. It's a lot harder than I thought it was, but we got into it like that. Started Saltwater Experience. That shows we're filming our 20th year on the air now, and it's been on all different kinds of networks from ESPN to NBC Sports, and now we're on Discovery Channel as the conventional television. But as you've probably seen, the conventional television ratings have just plummeted
yeah.
down that as
So I've
everybody.
seen your show quite a bit over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah, not like and I don't I can't say that I watch one outdoor show religiously anyway, but it would come on and I'd be like, "Oh, this is cool." And I'd watch it, and so yeah, I've definitely seen episodes of that of the TV show.
Yeah, thanks.
Mhm.
And it's been fun. We've learned a lot doing it, and it kind of overtook the guiding because when I first started, it was the TV show and guiding all at the same time, and then the TV show started to finally do a little bit better. And then we decided maybe, well, if people like an inshore saltwater show with two guys, maybe they'd like an offshore saltwater show with two guys. And so we went to two of our friends and shot a little pilot with them, and that turned into the Blue, and that one's been on for 16 years now with Steve Roger and Scott Walker. And we tried a bass show with the same kind of format. It was called Sweetwater, and that was eight years, I think. And we've now moved to another show called Life on the Water, and it's a little bit more kind of fishing, diving, water activity, and that's the newest product that we're working on. We've got I've got the podcast, which is kind of a passion project. I like podcasting. Think it's
Mm-hmm.
cool to have conversations with people, and have a reason to reach out to somebody. Like a lot of people that I just think are pretty cool on social media or Instagram, or they got a TV show or a podcast or something. If I reach out to them, chances are they're going to say yes, to a
Right.
conversation, to come in and sit down, and just like you and I are having right now. Like we've never met each other, but I can't say that with a lot of my friends, with everybody with their phones and everything else, that I've had a conversation as uh, as interesting for an hour with a lot of the people that I'm hanging around with all the time, because everybody's got so much going on. You
Oh
just
yeah.
that's what I liked about the podcast mostly, is that you get this opportunity to have a conversation with somebody that maybe you wouldn't talk to on a regular basis, or maybe you would, maybe it was a close friend, but you could go into some different subjects. I've enjoyed finding out how people got started in what they're doing. And typically there's like this moment where either they had another job and they want to be a fishing guide or a hunting guide, and they're this is kind of this side hobby for a little bit, and then they just sooner or later they got to make this jump. They got to make the jump of, I've taken this as far as I can possibly take it without quitting this job, and now I'm quitting this job and I'm going to this
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. And
Yeah.
I've heard that story from people that wanted to be hunting guides, fishing guides, professional, or not even professional sailors, but just like somebody that wants to live on a sailboat and quit everything in their life and go and travel through the Virgin Islands, and to this one girl that wanted to be a professional backpacker of all things. I mean, how in the world could you possibly make a living as a professional backpacker? I
Right.
mean, when we were growing up, a professional backpacker was a homeless person, right?
Right. A
Yeah.
transient. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you can, if you do it right, you can be on YouTube and you can have, 1 million subscribers, and you can get paid to go backpacking. And I just think
Mm.
that's cool. I really think it's really cool how there's this opportunity right now, to be able to really do anything you want to do. And the only thing holding you back is the guts to make the jump, and then the discipline and the willingness to do the work that it takes to excel at it. And honestly, that's been like, I love talking conservation and I love talking about fishing and different places we want to go and stuff. But of all the things that we've talked about on my podcast, those stories of those are some of the coolest stories I think that I've
Mm.
gotten, and
I didn't seek any of this out. I kind of backdoored my way into it. I wanted to do sports talk radio, and I
uh
got a degree in radio, TV, film. And my wife and I moved to Texarkana, and I got an on-air job there out of college. And my boss, who owned the radio station, was like, "Once a week, you got to do a 1-hour hunting and fishing show for all these good old boys here in the piney woods of East Texas." And I just fell in love with it. So I would call up like Phil Robertson, Duck Commander, and back then, this was before they were like huge. I just had their duck hunting DVDs. I was like, these guys
huh.
are awesome. And Phil's wife, Miss Kay, would just answer the phone and be like, "Phil's duck hunting. He'll be back at 1. Just call back then. He'll answer." Or record an hour conversation with this dude, and he was happy to do it. And so I fell in love with the people in the outdoor industry. It's totally just ditched the whole thing of sports talk radio. I still love it, but now I was like, I want to do this. And then when podcasts became popular, I was like, crap, this is
There it
more
is.
competition for me. I went and studied this to get a degree, and Now, any Tom, Dick, or Harry can do it, but it actually was the exact opposite. It just made my show just went like I luckily had already been doing it, but if you're good and you're committed to it, well, then now everybody can listen to it whenever they want to. They don't have to be by the dial listening on the radio. Which
Yeah, that's a big difference. How long have you been doing this show?
15 years.
Fif-
November will be 15 years. Yeah.
Wow, you're an early podcaster.
Yeah. But the podcast wasn't even a word that I knew when I would take the radio show. So this conversation will air on 20 radio stations. And, but I would take the radio show in the early days and just put it on iTunes. That was the only platform that existed.
Right.
So technically, oh, here's a podcast, right? But nobody was using that. If someone asked me, I said, hey, if you missed the radio show, you can just download it on iTunes. So here we are. And, I
What a
can't
world.
imagine doing anything else, man.
I mean, this world that's been created with podcasts is it's really amazing because just like you say, anyone can do it. You can do it. Just you could make a podcast with your phone, right? Like you don't even need like your phones have gotten so good that you don't even need all these microphones and everything else. You can make it better that way, but you can do it anyway. But most people, I think the stats are that there's so many millions and millions of podcasts out there, but only a small percentage make it past like 6 episodes.
Right.
And the ones that can make it past that are people that are really passionate about it, that really like it for another reason other than trying to make money at it, I think. And you seem to like the conversations, and I do too. And I've learned more doing my podcast than anything in recent history for
Yeah.
me. Like I
Oh,
learned a
100%. And
ton.
made tons of friends along the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
My elk hunting buddy, a college friend, the same guy whose dad had the boat out of Port Aransas, we do another podcast that's like more political, social issues. Has nothing in. We don't talk a lot of hunting or fishing, but we started recording these conversations that we were already having over the phone. We're both dads. I have 3 kids. He has 4 kids. We're just looking at the state of the world and we're like, this sucks. How do we make a difference? And whether we only have like 300 or 400 listeners every week, but we don't care, and it makes us zero. We lose money, right? We don't have any sponsors, but we were already having the conversations. He lives in San Antonio, so we talk on the phone, and I don't talk on the phone much. I don't really like talking on the phone, but I would talk to him. We'd have these hour-long conversations. Like we just start recording these things. Now we have like almost 200 episodes. Once a week we do it. Just a passion project, but yeah. But yeah, it's crazy. What is the highlight of your fishing career?
Well, it would be hard to put it on just one thing, but I mean, getting the show off the ground was great. There've been some really great tournament wins. There's been things that we have this fish, the permit, which is a really, really, really hard fish to catch, and to catch one on a fly rod is
Tough.
difficult, if not even stupid, to try on occasions. It's just, I mean, you can go a whole week and not, fishing with somebody that's really great and really super dedicated to it, and you don't hook a fish, I mean, in a whole week. And so I think the highlight of my fishing career would probably be just going down to the Keys and establishing myself and doing the work that it took to get any respect from anyone there, because I was the greenest, youngest, stupidest one to show up West for a long time. And, for a long time, I just tried to stay out of everybody's way. And in doing that, I learned some pretty weird little spots that still to this day work, that other people would never go to, because all I was really trying to do was just stay out of everybody's way. And then, oh, there's a fish. Look at that. That's amazing. And for whatever reason, not the type of spot you would go to. Just, I don't know. So I ended up having a lot of those type of little spots that could, produce on a tough day. And it helped me to have a pretty decent, guide career. But there have been a lot of great things. I don't know. One of the probably the most rewarding television show that we've done is my son has something called keratoconus in his eyes, and his eyes they want to take the shape of a football more so than the shape of a basketball. So they want to kind of go like this. And so when we learned about that, I started doing all this research because the thing that was on the internet was that you would need a transplant, a cornea transplant from a dead person. They'd take their and you'd sew it on, and there was a low chance of it working, and that's what we were kind of staring at. And I did some more research, and I found this Olympic bobsledder that was the driver for the Olympic bobsled in the Seoul Olympics. His name was Stephen Holcomb,
Huh.
and Stephen Holcomb had keratoconus, and he wrote this book about keratoconus, about how he overcame keratoconus. So I immediately got that book. I read it in one sitting, and I'm not the kind of guy that reads a book in one sitting. I mean, I read this book as fast as I could possibly read it. And he had this doctor named Dr. Brian Boxer Walkler. He was in California, and he created this new technique where basically it's kind of like, you probably do this with your arrows or other things where you have the epoxy and you hit it with a blue light, and it hardens immediately
Right.
with its blue light. Blue light has some kind of effect on it. That what he did is he figured out that you could put this riboflavin, which is basically vitamin B, in your eyes, and then you could hit it with this blue light, and it could strengthen the fibers of the eye so much that you didn't get rid of keratoconus, but your eye became strong enough to where it wouldn't affect it anymore. So
Hmm.
you could basically freeze it in a moment in time. So anyway, this is kind of an experimental thing. And after I read that book, I went out there. We got my son in with Dr. Boxer Walkler. He did this procedure on him, and he got these special contacts, and he's had 20/20 vision ever since. He has
Wow.
incredible vision. And so he saved his sight. And so when I was with Brian, the doctor, we became friends, and he told me he loved to fish. And I was like, well, we gotta do a show. And so I had Dr. Brian Boxer Walkler, Stephen Holcomb, the bobsled driver, and my son, and we all went down and did a show on tarpon fishing in the Keys. And
Wow.
that was that was maybe, one of the shows that sticks
Oh,
out.
cool.
Certainly, they're but it's kind of like this podcast. Like, you just have this platform and this opportunity where you can do something kind of cool, and
Hmm.
that meant really something to me. And my partner's had a couple of guests that he likes, and we have them on the show, and that really means something to him. And this particular one was really, really important to me. Another one was when Rich had his dad and I had my dad, and so the four of us, two generations, went tarpon fishing in the same place, ironically, as the story I told before. And this big hammerhead came up and ate my dad's tarpon but it was just an exciting day. But it was just cool because Rich's dad just passed away this year, and my dad's getting older, and we have that memory of us, all four of us being on that boat together and shooting this TV show. And it was cool for our dads because, I mean, quite honestly, our dads probably thought, man, I think we've lost them. I don't know. They want to make a living at this fishing. I don't know. They were both very patient, and it could have been worse, but they were patient and supportive, and it actually worked out to where we were doing okay. And here's this celebration of having both of them on the boat with us. That was a super special thing.
Hmm. Hmm. I gotta thank my wife for being patient because I don't think I made any money. Because when I started out, I had to buy the airtime on the radio stations, right? And then I had to recruit sponsors, and well, I'm buying this airtime, but where are the sponsors, right? So I'm losing money, probably for sure the first year. And God bless her, she stuck it out. I was like, "You're gonna make money eventually, right?" And I was like, I hope so. I'm gonna keep grinding at it." But to put it into perspective, I would take a $200 check from John's Striper Guide service on Lake Texoma, and I'd make him a commercial. To be honest with you, today I wouldn't make a commercial for $200, right? But I would make that commercial and I'd run it for like 3 months for $200, and that's where it started, right? And I was thankful. Oh my gosh, I was so thankful to have that $200.
course.
Yeah.
There's
But
probably,
yeah,
you can
my
probably
wife
look back
stuck it
on
out.
many of those $200 checks, and had they not come in, might have been the end. Like they
Yeah.
probably came right at the right moment.
Yeah.
Right.
God is good. That's the truth.
That's right.
Well, okay. Wrapping it up, where can folks find you, Tom? You got a lot of outlets.
Yes, there are a lot of outlets. Saltwater Experience is the TV show. You can also find Into the Blue and Life on the Water. We're on the Waypoint platform, Waypoint TV. You can go to your smart TV and see Waypoint TV on Samsung, Vizio, 12 or 13 others. It's an app. The Discovery Channel is where the show airs on conventional TV, websites and social media for all of that. And then the Tom Rowland podcast. That's my show that I put out 2 episodes a week right now. And it's on all the podcast platforms and YouTube, or you can go to tomrowlandpodcast.com.
Awesome. Well, man, I've certainly enjoyed getting to know you a little bit. Thank
Thanks, man.
you so much for the time. It's been a treat.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me. I'd love to have you on my podcast too.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll make it happen. Well, thanks again, Tom.
All
God
right.
bless.
Thank you.
Take care. All
See ya.
right.